Hi everyone, welcome to English Digest. I'm Kat.
And I am Pat.
And today we are talking about Newswatch. So we have two great news stories for you, a little bit short ones, and two very different topics, I would say.
Yeah, we're starting off with coffee. What are your coffee habits, Kat?
When I'm at home, I usually make myself apparently not very strong coffee, but I kind of like the mocha blends, and I do hand pour, and then I add just a little bit of soy milk or almond milk, some kind of slightly sweet milk, and make myself like a basic latte. How about you?
I tend to take it black. I don't often go for the flavored kinds. I like to make mine with a French press.
Oh.
It's just what I've grown up with. It's what my parents had, so for me that just seems that's a coffee thing.
So not everybody, but a lot of people love drinking coffee.
Yep.
And then the other story we have is about AI.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to talk about. So let's read through the articles and find out what they're all about.
Atomo Coffee promises a hot cup of joe without the beans. People around the world enjoy starting their day with a cup of coffee, but it's not the greenest drink in the world. Sadly, coffee growing often has negative impacts on the environment. Atomo Coffee, a startup in Seattle, US, is working to lighten that load by creating completely beanless coffee. The exact process of how it's made is still a secret for now. But co-founders Jarrett Stopforth and Andy Kleitch promise that Atomo is sustainable and uses ingredients like sunflower seed husks and watermelon seeds. In a taste test, most participants actually preferred the flavor of Atomo over Starbucks, a possible competitor. Touting that success, and with millions of dollars of funding behind them, Stopforth and Kleitch have committed to bringing their environmentally friendly coffee to American markets in 2021. Additionally, they claim they'll be able to tweak the process to produce drinks with different flavor characteristics. Lovers of fine coffee will be able to replace their high-end roasted beans with something greener that still fits their preferences. Stopforth and Kleitch aim to sell Atomo at a price that's competitive with regular coffee.
Using AI to model and plan for disasters. Living in Taiwan unfortunately means getting used to two major natural risks, typhoons and earthquakes. A tool that might prove useful for places like Taiwan was recently created by scientists at the University of California, Berkeley. It's a computer program that can predict how a building will fare during a serious disaster. Named Braille's Building Recognition Using AI at Large Scale, it works for earthquakes, storms, and tsunamis. Braille's creates a digital portrait of a building using a wide range of data, including satellite images from Google Maps. Once it's created this computerized mock building, it can simulate the effects of a disaster on the building. It can also predict what kind of damage it will receive and how severe it will be. To assess the model, the researchers created simulations of historical disasters and compared their tool's outcomes to the actual records. They proudly claimed 90 to 100% accuracy for Braille's based on such tests. Their intention is for it to be used to help city planners and rescue workers in places affected by disasters, so it's possible the system will see use in Taiwan.
All right, so we have two really interesting stories today. We said it was about coffee and AI, but it almost seems it's more like about not coffee and disasters. So, yeah, we have slightly different themes than we have in the title, but let's go ahead and read the first one. So the title says, Atomo Coffee promises a hot cup of joe without the beans. So, yeah, a hot cup of joe. You see this phrase in the title, and it's kind of a strange one. You guys don't call it Joe in the UK, right?
Some people would, but we'd know it as an American idiom.
Okay, yeah. So we would call it a hot cup of Joe. And this is just because Joe is kind of the everyman's name, like kind of like John or Bob or something like that. So, coffee is everyman's drink. So it's sort of like the hot cup of whatever everybody else drinks, which is coffee. And it's without the beans.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And that's important for the environment. And that's how we kick off the article. People around the world enjoy starting their day with a cup of coffee, but it's not the greenest drink in the world. Of course, coffee isn't green.
What is the greenest drink in the world? Matcha?
Lime juice, yeah, something like that. But of course, we don't mean green the color, we mean the most environmentally friendly. Yeah, we know that coffee growing, the beans, the water it takes, the areas of country it uses, that it doesn't make it the best kind of, compared to tea, for example.
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
Not as green.
Yeah, so, the process of growing tea is probably a little more friendly. I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert in that. But coffee apparently takes a lot of land, a lot of resources, and sometimes the growing practices are not very fair to farmers. So, yeah, the next sentence says about as much. Sadly, coffee growing often has negative impacts on the environment.
So next we see that Atomo Coffee, a startup in Seattle, US, is working to lighten that load by creating completely beanless coffee. So a startup is, of course, a small company with a sort of specific aim in mind that's just started to try and get something done, something new, something different, kind of create a new area in the market. And it's trying to lighten the load. To lighten something means to make something lighter or less. And to lighten the load basically means to reduce the burden, to reduce the amount of pressure, in this case, on the environment caused by coffee. They figure if they can create a coffee that doesn't use coffee beans, then we'll need to grow less coffee in total, and therefore that will be better for the environment. But how do they do this?
Well, we don't know. And I think it's appropriate that this is a startup based in Seattle because Seattle is kind of known as the home of, roasting coffee because that's where Starbucks began and it's where a lot of artisanal coffee comes from. So, yeah, we don't really know how they do this exactly because the next sentence in the next paragraph says the exact process of how it's made is still a secret for now. So we could imagine maybe they use some magic to do it. I don't know.
Well, yeah, or certainly like the exact ingredients, what goes into it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What we do know is that co-founders Jarrett Stopforth and Andy Kleitch promise that Atomo is sustainable and uses ingredients like sunflower seed husks and watermelon seeds. Okay, so these are co-founders. If you found something, you start that thing. It's often used for a business, a company, an organization, even a university or an institution. You found it. You basically begin it, you get everything ready, and off you go with the business. And here we have co-founders, so that means the two people who founded it together. They both bought their ideas, their money, maybe a space where they can do it. They combine to get it started, and so they're the two guys that kicked it off.
Yeah, exactly. So they say that Atomo is sustainable and it uses ingredients like sunflower seed husks and watermelon seeds. Now, seed coffee sounds really weird, but if you think about it, coffee is already made from beans and that's not that different. So they use watermelon seeds. They also use sunflower seed husks. Husks are just the outside of the seed. So like when you eat sunflower seeds, you might chew it up and then you get whatever's inside and then you spit out the rest. The part that you spit out is the husk. It's basically the seed shell. So, yeah, and how did it do in a taste test? Well, the next sentence says, in a taste test, most participants actually preferred the flavor of Atomo over Starbucks, a possible competitor. Now, that's a big deal because Starbucks is very, very popular.
Yeah. It's obviously one of the big names known worldwide. And that's, I think, why they say it's a possible competitor. Obviously, a small startup can't hope to compete with, it can't hope to be a business rival of Starbucks just yet. because that's what a competitor is. It's basically another company or person or a group that's doing the same kind of business as you. So you're both trying to get the same audience, the same customers, sell to the same people, and often have them make a choice. Do I want to buy this or this? So in phones, you think of Apple and Samsung, two big competitors. You know, DC and Marvel in the comics world, they are competitors. So Starbucks maybe isn't a competitor for Atomo yet because it's far bigger, it's got such bigger reach, but it might be in the future if they can get this thing going, this beanless coffee. If it becomes a big favorite, then yeah, you might be choosing one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And so it sounds like so far, so good. And, you know, it tastes good and people preferred it over a very popular brand. So the next sentence says, touting that success and with millions of dollars of funding behind them, Stopforth and Kleitsch have committed to bringing their environmentally friendly coffee to American markets in 2021. So what it's saying is that they are touting their success. Touting something is kind of showing it off or saying like, look, this is what I have and I'm going to put it out there as an example. Usually you tout something to show that you are capable or to show that you are successful. So you would tout your good grades, tout your success, maybe touting your position at a company. So kind of showing it off in a way that proves you're successful.
Yeah, and it's also touting something is pretty direct. They're not kind of hiding anything or doing it in a clever way. They're going, nope, look at this. Here it is. Check out these numbers. Check out this taste test. And they'll say it again and again to get their message across.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've also got a lot of funding, which is important. Millions of dollars of funding, either from people who are kind of buying into this or other industry or environmental groups that are saying, yep, we'll pay you, we'll support you if you can get this environmentally friendly coffee done. So that's why they have committed to bringing this coffee to American markets in 2021. If you commit to something, you basically make a promise. You say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And this is when it's going to be done. So if they fail, it kind of reflects badly on them because they have basically promised and said, yep, this is it. This is what we are going to do and nothing's going to stop us no matter what.
Yeah, so when you commit to something, it's like you make a promise. You basically say, we're doing this no matter what. So yeah, you make a commitment, and I'd say, you know, that could apply to things like marriages or any other agreements that you have with somebody. You're committed. All right, so in the last paragraph begins, additionally, they claim they'll be able to tweak the process to produce drinks with different flavor characteristics. So this is an interesting bit. We don't all like the same kind of coffee. Some people like theirs stronger. Some people like it a little bit lighter, like me. And they'll be able to tweak their coffee to make it what people want. So to tweak something means to kind of change it in little ways. Like if you have maybe a car and you want to make some tweaks on it, you would probably change little things like maybe something about the wheels or not the paint job. That wouldn't be a tweak. It'd be something small. So yeah, tweaks would be little changes. They're noticeable, or maybe they're hard to notice, but they're not very big. They're just, changes that make a noticeable difference.
That's right. We also see that lovers of fine coffee will be able to replace their high-end roasted beans with something greener that still fits their preferences. High-end basically means high quality. It kind of means it's at the higher end of the market, which means it's supposed to be a lot better, but it's also going to be a lot more expensive. It's kind of like saying top brand. So high-end, brands, Gucci, LV, all that kind of stuff. That's what we think of as high-end, Bulgari kind of stuff.
Yeah, or top shelf. Like if you're buying something at the store, the top shelf stuff is more likely to be more quality, more expensive, that sort of thing. But people who like these high-end roasted beans, people who are basically coffee snobs, will be able to find something that fits their preferences. So as you know, if you prefer something, that means that you like it over other things. And so your preference is the thing that you prefer, or basically your taste. So if you have a certain preference for a certain kind of coffee, you'll be able to find something that fits that taste.
So we also see Stopforth and Kleitsch aim to sell Atomo at a price that's competitive with regular coffee. Now, this is pretty important. A lot of super environmentally friendly products are often a bit more expensive, and that means people are reluctant to pay the extra, even though they know it's good for the planet.
Yeah.
But making a competitive price, in other words, it's the same or around the same price as regular coffee, that means people won't have to choose based on price. They'll be able to choose based on what they prefer or what they think is better for the earth. I do have one question, though. Does this coffee have caffeine in it?
I looked it up, and apparently it can. It has they artificially add caffeine to put it at about the same rate as a normal cup of coffee.
Okay.
So it's like 100 milligrams per cup.
Right, of kind of...
But you can get decaf.
Oh, I mean, I assume that in its natural state it would be decaf and the coffee would be added. It's obviously a lot of people drink coffee for the caffeine effect, not just the taste. So
exactly.
That was a thing I wondered about. Well, that brings us to the end of the first article. We're going to take a short break now and then come back in a moment to talk about AI.
All right, we are back with our second story for the Newswatch article, Using AI to Model and Plan for Disasters. So, yeah, it says it's an AI thing, but it's more about disasters, and it's about a tool that the people use to plan for disasters. So, disasters would be well, the article kind of says it's like typhoons, tsunamis, earthquakes, storms, volcanoes, forest fires, nuclear plant explosions, things like that.
It could be man-made or it could be a natural disaster. It's something terrible.
Yeah.
Something has gone very badly wrong and a lot of people are suffering. Things are being damaged. People are being killed or hurt. It's something that's really terrible, basically, is a disaster.
Yeah, and you can also use this in an exaggerated way, like if you maybe are planning like a group meeting or a presentation or something and it just goes really, really wrong. You can say, that was a disaster. Yeah. So, of course, we have a lot of these in Taiwan, don't we?
Oh, yes. We kind of get used to them. You get used to the shaking. And as it says, living in Taiwan, unfortunately, means getting used to two major natural risks, typhoons and earthquakes. So this phrase, getting used to, and we'll see another way we can use the used to part later, but to get used to something basically means to adjust the way you think about and behave around something in order that it becomes the normal, basically. You just go, all right, this is how things are. I will not think of them as strange anymore. I will just adapt myself so I can cope when they happen. Like maybe getting used to a new job takes you a few months, but you change how you think of it. You start to understand things. You just become familiar with all the different ways that job works. And it's the same with typhoons. There are no earthquakes, almost none in the UK, and no typhoons. So it was all new to me, so I had to get used to, building shaking, that's normal. I don't have to run outside scared. Typhoons, all right, just stay at home. Don't go out in the wind and the rain.
Yeah. I made the mistake of trying to go out in a typhoon that I thought wasn't that bad when I was first living here. It was that bad.
It was.
Yeah.
Very wet.
Anyway, so yeah, it's definitely a risk, or two major natural risks. And we would like to know how to predict them, right? So
Helpful.
The next sentence says, a tool that might prove useful for places like Taiwan was recently created by scientists at the University of California, Berkeley, which we also call UC Berkeley. Yeah, so it's, they made a tool at this university because California also has a lot of earthquakes, especially in the area that Berkeley is in, which is close to San Francisco. Yeah, there's a big fault line there. So what kind of program is this?
Well, it's a computer program that can predict how a building will fare during a serious disaster. This word fare basically means how does it cope? What happens to it in this situation? Will the building fall down? Will it resist it? How much damage will it suffer? in what condition will it be in afterwards compared to how it was before? We can ask you people the same thing when they take an exam. How did you fare in the exam? How did you fare in the job interview? It just means, how did it go? Did it go well? Did it go badly? What happened from it? That kind of thing.
And we also have kind of an old-style goodbye, farewell. It's actually 2 words, or it used to be 2 words. It's now 1 word, and it just means, like, I hope you do well wherever you're going. Farewell. Yeah. So we have this computer program that can predict how buildings are going to do during these disasters. And it says, the next sentence says, named Braille's building recognition using AI at large scale. It works for earthquakes, storms, and tsunamis. So building recognition using AI at large scale, Braille's. I'm guessing they didn't want to use the using in there because that would make it Bruales, and that sounds weird. So it works for earthquakes, which we have here, storms, which happen everywhere, and tsunamis, which hopefully Taiwan doesn't have any of those. They're very, very bad. A tsunami is when, usually after an earthquake, a very, very large ocean wave crashes onto land and causes a lot of damage. So Japan, unfortunately, has these. That's why tsunami is a Japanese word, even in English.
So, how does it work? We see Braille's creates a digital portrait of a building using a wide range of data, including satellite images from Google Maps. So, of course, this is AI, it's artificial, it's being created in this sort of digital virtual world, and they're saying, right, let's use everything we know about this building, including this Google Maps data, to make a kind of virtual, identical kind of building. And then we can sort of do things to it in the virtual world to see what happens.
So, yeah, they use real data from real buildings to create basically a simulation, which is something we'll talk about later. And the next sentence says, once it's created this computerized mock building, it can simulate the effects of a disaster on the building. So basically, you put the building in a computer simulation, and then you do something to it. You either put it through an earthquake, you put it through a typhoon, and it's computerized. It's all computerized. That means it's only happening in the computer. And the typhoon or earthquake or the other disaster is simulated, which means that it's kind of modeled in a digital way. It's not a real one, but it's having all the effects that a real one would have on this computerized building.
Exactly. You're just taking what the real force would be of this earthquake and using, again, data to see how much wind, how much force of earth moving, all that kind of stuff, what direction it's coming from. So we'll see, well, what happens if we make the wind this strong? What happens if we make the earthquake this strong? And they will see, using all that data, will run together and it will predict what will happen. Okay, as we say in the next sentence, it can also predict what kind of damage it will receive and how severe it will be. So will the building fall down? Will part of it fall down? How much damage will it get from objects that are blown? Maybe they look at buildings near it collapsing and seeing what effect that will have. They can just try all these different scenarios and situations to really understand and predict, which basically means to look into the future and make a very accurate guess of what really will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what they did. And they didn't just kind of put in a random earthquake and say, okay, well, what if we make it this strong? They actually used data from real past disasters. So the next paragraph begins saying, to assess the model, which means to test the model, the researchers created simulations of historical disasters and compared their tools' outcomes to the actual records. So simulations is the noun form of simulate, so that means it's basically a computer model of this historical disaster, something that happened in history. It might be like the earthquake that happened in 1999, was it? Or it could be older disasters like maybe the San Francisco earthquake, which happened in the early 1900s. It could be old typhoons, things like that. They just basically took that data and put it into the computer exactly as it happened. And then they compared the outcomes from their tool to what actually happened in real life.
outcomes means results. So what happened in real life? Did the building fall down? Did it catch fire? Did it just come through the disaster with no problems at all? What happens in our computer model? Let's compare the two. According to our computer, this would happen. In the real world, this actually did happen to buildings in and around the area. So they're just really looking at, well, how good is our tool? Can it really predict what happens based on and compared with what really did happen the last time this was a big, there was a big earthquake or there were very strong winds? And how did they do?
Well, apparently they did extremely well. They proudly claimed 90 to 100% accuracy for Braille's based on such tests. That's a very high rate of success, much higher than most things. Yeah. So accuracy here is talking about how close to the reality it is. So if you're 90 to 100% accurate, like let's say that you're shooting at a target with either like an arrow or a gun or something like that. If you are 100% accurate, you'll get it exactly in the middle. So 90 to 100% accuracy here means that their simulations were almost exactly like what actually happened.
Yep, some variants, maybe some that were not quite perfect, but still, sometimes they got it exactly right. Sometimes they got it 90% right. We got almost all of it correct based on our model.
Yeah.
So
Which
this
is
article,
much better than humans could do.
Yes, exactly, because they'd be just guessing, well, I think that might happen, and last time this happened, but we've made it stronger. So.
Even if you're good at physics and math, I think a human could not get 90% accurate predictions.
So we see in the final sentence of this story, their intention, so that's the scientist, the researcher's intention, is for it to be used to help city planners and rescue workers in places affected by disasters, so it's possible the system will see use in Taiwan. So earlier we talked about getting used to something, which is becoming familiar with it. Here we see a similar pattern, be used to, but this pattern is used to say what something is going to be used for. It's the purpose of a particular tool or model or anything really. So do be careful when you're looking at get used to, be used to something, like I am used to getting up late, whereas here it's this is going to be used to do this thing. One way you can tell is if you're, say, getting used to something, it's going to be followed by a noun or a VING, whereas be used to is always going to be followed by the infinitive base form of the verb. Be used to help, be used to do, be used to clean, something like that.
Right, and there's actually a difference in pronunciation too. So when you say get used to, it's with a T, used to. And then when you say be used to, you separate used and to. Be used to do this. Yeah. So that's what we've got for our article today. And so we hope you've enjoyed learning about the news with us, and we hope that this will be useful to you. Maybe you can buy some Atomo Coffee sometime in the future, or you'll see Braille's being used in Taiwan. So for ED, I'm Kat.
And I am Pat.
We'll see you next time.
Cheers. Bye.